Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We've talked a lot about this USC team over the last couple of weeks and months. And, quite frankly, a lot of our conversation has been on the recruiting trail, in the transfer portal, and rightfully so. There's been a lot to talk about in terms of talent acquisition for this USC program. With that being said, I feel like we haven't talked enough about where this USC team sits going into 2025. We haven't talked enough about some really fascinating spring practice storylines that have emerged for USC. So I figured Wednesday afternoon, kind of a slow news day across the college football landscape. Let's freaking empty the clip. Let's talk about some players that we haven't talked a ton about over the last couple of weeks and talk about some difference makers that have emerged within this USC program during spring practice. And you have to start the conversation off with what Lincoln Riley said is clearly the quarterback one of this football team going into fall camp and wrapping up spring practice. That's Jaden. And to the USC fans that have rocked with the fellas for a while, y'all know I've expressed my concerns at times about Jaden, quarterback one going into 2025. And it was not coming from, I don't believe in this kid. I mean, he's about as physically gifted of a quarterback that you can see across the country. Just you go back to the 2024 year, those last four starts, and say, liked a lot of the stuff he did, made a lot of difference-making plays that Miller Moss, quite frankly, didn't make for USC, but it was a little bit of a roller coaster. Lincoln Riley, post-practice, yesterday afternoon, very clearly said Jaden's the quarterback one, and then was asked, hey, where is he taking the most strides? Lincoln Riley goes, decision-making and understanding what we're doing on the offensive side of the football, and kind of pressed the idea that, look, Jaden came in last year prior to spring, but was, the quarterback too behind Miller Moss and wasn't really the guy taking the lion's share of the reps. They were designing this offense for a guy like Miller Moss. Guess that's a long way of saying we know that Jaden has the ability to be a very good quarterback for USC. We know that his head coach has a long track record of getting the best out of his quarterbacks, specifically ones that are like Jaden, who can create throw-off platform. I might have expressed my doubts about Jaden, but if he takes the step that Lincoln Riley's saying, this kid's going to be really fun to watch in the 2025 year. Want to get a little bit more into Jaden, talk about where this USC offense sits, what it's going to look like, highlight some more names that I think we got to talk about before we get into it. As always, the USC fans, appreciate you guys. Whether we're talking the portal, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, whether we're talking spring practice, all the fight ons y'all throw in the comment section, all the love, the support, that stuff, it means the world. And quite frankly, it's why we talk as much USC football as we do. I'm having a blast doing it, and the amount of support has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I think the first takeaway is clearly quarterback one. There's not a lot of coaches that use that terminology this early on before a 2025 season. That tells you about the steps that Jaden has taken, more specifically, between the ears. Because, again, there were so many things that you saw Jaden do that you really liked, but there were so many things that just made you scratch your head. We know he's got some real potential. We just can't have it be as much of a roller coaster as it was during those last four starts. Now, one thing I will shout out that I don't think we talk about enough is he won football games for USC. At the end of the day, wins and losses, to me, that's a quarterback stat. You can make it look as ugly as you want, but if you go out and get the job done and come up big when it matters most, that matters at the quarterback position. You could arguably make the argument that Miller Moss played better than Jaden at times in the 2024 year, but Jaden was 3-1 as a starter. The only loss came to Notre Dame, which played for a national championship, in which the offense put up 35 points against Notre Dame. Like, you saw a lot of good things from Jaden. You just want it to be a little bit more consistent. And Lincoln Riley coming out and saying, hey, he's understanding the offense a little bit more. He's making better decisions, which is probably the biggest thing we want to hear. You love to hear that if you're a USC fan. Two other reasons that I think you can start buying the stock in Jaden. There's a lot. It starts with Lincoln Riley and what he's done with quarterbacks. Two other things. Number one, being the quarterback one throughout spring practice and having the offense kind of designed towards your skill set and what you like to do, that's really big. You last year, I mean, the offense was designed for Miller Moss. A lot of the things that USC installed during spring and fall camp and rep was for, hey, Miller Moss and Jaden are different quarterbacks. Miller Moss is going to be our quarterback one. We gotta get stuff in there that Miller Moss does well. And then you kind of just took Jaden and threw him into the offense without really taking many quarterback one reps going back to spring or fall camp. What happens when he gets the lion's share of reps, which was not happening 12 months ago, and Lincoln Riley gets more comfortable with what Jaden wants to do as opposed to what Miller Moss liked to do? It's a big story. Then the second storyline, and this I think is really important. You're going to have better pass catchers around him. And I think some USC fans are sitting there and saying, hey, we just lost Deuce Robinson, Zachariah Branch. The hell is this guy talking about? On paper, you could make the argument, but what fires me up the most is that USC did not know and did not treat Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon as the wide receiver ones of the offense. You go back to the early portions of 2024, Mekhi Lemon in the first 4 games of the season had 10 targets. Like, heck, Mekhi Lemon should be getting 10 targets a game for USC in the 2025 year. What about Jacoby Lane? For the first 3 games, he only had 11 targets. And so I look at it and say, last year they didn't have a clear understanding of who their best players were at the wide receiver position. And I think there was an element of, hey, we're paying Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch all this money. We got to get him involved. And they forced the issue to get Deuce and Zachariah involved. Like, now you're going into 2025 with a very clear picture of who your guys are. And it's Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. They were the best wide receivers on the team last year. Now they are going into 2025. That's big. Sometimes in college football, offenses struggle to identify their difference makers and don't get them the football enough. I think we saw that with USC in 2024. Like, they were trying so hard to get Zachariah Branch involved, and it just wasn't working. And then when you started to kind of turn the page and say, oh, wait, Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane are the guys that we got to start getting the balls to and opportunities to, that's going to help this USC offense in a big way. Love to hear from Jaden. I think there are a lot of reasons to believe in Jaden going into 2025. And look, it hasn't been perfect for him. Whole year starter, more comfortable in the offense. It can get a lot better for this kid going into 2025. And from a game experience standpoint, he wasn't all that experienced last year. Started 1 year at UNLV in 2023, new time in the offense. A lot of reason to believe in Jaden. Now, I want to get into a few other names that kind of are firing me up in terms of generating buzz. Alani Noah. One thing that I will stress with this USC offensive line, you got a bunch of guys who are getting better at football, and you can take it from me as a Michigan fan. Michigan last year had a lot of guys that were going into year 4, year 5. And it's like, hey, you hope they get better. But if they were going to get better, they probably would have gotten better a little bit earlier in their college football careers. What I mean by that is you're starting offensive line, guys like Elijah Page, guys like Tobias Raymond, guys like Alani Noah. Although it was not perfect for those kids in the 2024 year, all 3 of them were redshirt freshmen that were still developing, first-year starters. And now you go into 2025 and Tobias Raymond kind of seeming like he's locking down that right tackle spot, fired up about what we're hearing from him. Elijah Page kind of blossomed low-key at the end of 2024 and one of the better tackles we saw in the country. Thought Alani Noah played some better football too. Lincoln Riley said towards the end of the year, Alani Noah is one of our best offensive linemen. This offensive line has a bunch of guys that, you added a few transfer portal additions. You're rocking with a few guys returning from last year. This unit, these players, these guys going into year 3, they have a lot of opportunity to get better. And quite frankly, that sounds to be like what we're hearing in spring. Alani Noah, Tobias Raymond, taking the steps necessary for this USC offensive line. Another intriguing thing coming out of spring. We got to talk about Wayman Jordan, who really seems to be the running back one, and it's a big storyline. Going into spring practice, Brian Jackson, Eli Sanders, Wayman Jordan, like who we know we had 3 capable backs. Like, who is going to separate? Who is going to emerge and kind of be that true running back one? It sounds like it's going to be Wayman Jordan, which I think is exciting. USC's hit on some transfer portal additions at the running back spot, and I kind of consider Wayman Jordan a transfer portal addition coming from JUCO. Can they do it again with Wayman Jordan in 2025? And I do think that USC will try to run the football more, especially with Jaden at quarterback. And when USC decided to run it last year, they didn't stick to it as much as I think a lot of us would have liked. But when they decided to run it, they ran the football well. And you got a big offensive line like Elijah Page, a big boy, Alani Noah, big boy. Tobias Raymond, I think, is pushing 320. Like, it's a big, nasty, it's a Big Ten offensive line. And I think they can have some success running the football if they stick to it a little bit more in 2025. Not to mention Jaden grades out a heck of a lot better working off play action, which I think is intriguing to note as well. Switching to the defensive side of the football, just the guy that's getting lost in the mix, who I think is going to have – he had a good year last year. Like, Devin Tompkins playing at like 280 soaking wet last year, played pretty well in spots where, USC was probably not using him in his ideal spot, asking him to be a true interior guy, eat up some double teams. It's not what Devin Tompkins is supposed to do. Number one, the body. Changed his jersey to number 8. Saw him in spring practice. Like that looks like a Big Ten defensive lineman. Whereas like last year, like he played well, undersized, but didn't quite look the part. Evan Tompkins looks the part too. That whole defensive line like looks the part, and I think a lot of our attention goes to the new faces. Whether it's John Jarrett, whether it's a guy like Jakeem Stewart. Devin Tompkins might be one of the better interior defensive linemen on this football team. And you're hearing that type of thing coming out of spring. Jaden Walker. I think USC, like 3 weeks ago, we were like, USC needs to grab 2 linebackers in the portal. Well, it sounds like they only have to grab 1 now. And that's because the emergence of Jaden Walker. Like going into spring, we weren't really sure if this kid was going to be ready to play for USC as a depth piece. Sounds like he is. Credit one, Coach Wiley in the weight room. Jaden Walker came into USC 195. Like, had to put on some weight if you want to play Big Ten linebacker. Did that. Good athlete, flies around the football field. One of the things that fires me up about USC's linebacker room is they finally got the bodies they want. Like, they kind of had to settle for guys like Mason Cobb, guys like Easton Mascarenas Arnold, because Eric Gentry went down and Desmond Stevens and Jaden Walker, weren't quite ready. It's very clear that Dan Lynn wants a little bit more length and a little bit more speed. Desmond Stevens, Eric Gentry, Jaden Walker, Tamir Robinson coming in. I think Jaden Walker at 6'2" is the shortest linebacker of that group, and they're all fast. Like Anthony Beaver's making the transition from safety to linebacker. He can run in space. He played safety for most of his career. Got your guys that you got the athletic profiles that you're looking for in the linebacker position. Bishop Fitzgerald at safety. This sounds like it's a clear upgrade from Achille Arnold. And like Achille Arnold just wasn't all that good last year, I didn't think. Bishop Fitzgerald, I think, is better in coverage, has played over 1,200 snaps, a guy that only missed 7% of his tackles at NC State last year in the ACC. Him and Kamari Ramsey are going to be a very, very good safety duo. Now, the depth behind them might be a little bit of a question. I love Marquise Gallegos. I was a big fan of the addition of Kennedy Urlacher. I think your top 2 safeties, like Kamari Ramsey, only get better going into year 2 at USC. I think Bishop Fitzgerald probably sounds to be like just a straight up upgrade from a guy like Achille Arnold. A little bit more athletic, tackles in space a little bit better, can hold up in coverage. Hearing all the right things. And I think the last thing I'll probably note regarding this USC team as we pull up the depth chart is the depth of this football team is probably in a better spot than we thought it was going to be in. Especially on the offensive line. Like, we were nervous about what the depth would look like. Hearing really good things about Justin T as your swing tackle. Justin T is probably going to be tackle 3, could play left tackle, could play right tackle. You want to have 3 tackles that you trust. USC sounds like they have 3. Now, you look on the inside and maybe it's a little bit thinner than what you would like, and I'm interested to see if USC grabs one more body in the portal, but then go to the defense. Defensive line, it ain't no question this team's deeper than it was. Linebacker, I mean, you got now with the addition of Tamir Robinson, you probably got 4 or 5 linebackers that you trust. Maybe a little bit thin in the secondary, but I mean, the overall depth of this team's probably better than what we thought it was going to be going into spring practice. Probably why you haven't seen USC get as aggressive in the portal. We'll see how it shakes out. The intel that we're getting on Jaden, I think, should excite a lot of USC fans. It certainly excites me. I feel like sometimes when I express a concern about a player, it's like I ain't rooting for them. Like, no, I'm rooting for a kid like Jaden to play the best football he's capable of, because that's gonna be fun to watch for me on Saturdays. Like, I'm rooting for Jaden to come out and kind of reach his potential. And it sounds like we might be hearing that. Oh, last one, Floyd Bucard. Everyone wants to talk about Jakeem Stewart. Not like Jakeem Stewart too. I love Floyd Bucard too. He sounds like he might be ready to play too. All right, now we'll actually sign out. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.